We start off this morning, though, with new information in the grand jury proceedings here in New York against former President Donald Trump.
Jurors are weighing whether to indict the former president for his alleged hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Attorney Rob Costello, the final witness in the proceedings, testified yesterday on Trump's behalf. Afterward, he told reporters that he spent most of his time trying to undermine the credibility of the prosecution's key witness, Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen. Costello previously served as a legal advisor to Cohen, but the two have since had a falling out. Costello had this to say about his former colleague.
I'm the one who decided to do this. A lot of people cautioned me against it because I had nothing to gain. The only thing I'm doing is trying to tell the truth to the grand jurors. If they want to go after Donald Trump and they have solid evidence, so be it. But Michael Cohen is far from solid evidence. This guy, by any prosecutor's standard, and I used to be deputy chief of the criminal division in the Southern District of New York, I wouldn't have touched a guy like Michael Cohen, especially if he's a convicted perjurer.
The grand jury is expected to return on Wednesday, tomorrow, to decide on whether to issue an indictment. We have NBC News legal analyst Danny Savallo standing by to help break down these grand jury proceedings. But first, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. He is got the latest from West Palm Beach, Florida. Vaughn, good morning to you. So Michael Cohen was standing by to rebut Rob Costello's testimony yesterday, but in the end says he wasn't called. So what all do we know about Costello's testimony, and what is Michael Cohen saying about this?
Right. Robert Costello went in front of this grand jury at the behest of the Trump's legal counsel. The grand jury is convened by the district attorney, who brings forward to them evidence and potential witnesses who could help make his case to bring charges against a particular subject, in this case, Donald Trump, but presented them the opportunity, the Trump's legal counsel, to bring somebody forward before the grand jury, that individual, Robert Costello, who, as you just heard, countered Michael Cohen's testimony and questioned whether he embellished allegations against Donald Trump. That leads to Michael Cohen being present in Lower Manhattan yesterday as a potential rebuttal witness to Costello. Lanny Davis, ultimately Michael Cohen's attorney, said that they were there for multiple hours but were never called back into the room. Take a listen to Michael Cohen himself explain what unfolded yesterday afternoon.
It's a typical Donald J. Trump play out of the playbook. Figure out how you're going to muddy the water as best as you possibly can, denigrate the person, disparage them. The district attorney has the documentation in order to validate every single statement that I've made.
Michael Cohen is the crucial witness here. He was, of course, the former fixer and lawyer for Donald Trump, who flipped on him several years ago after serving his own prison time. He is the key witness if there were to be criminal proceedings against Donald Trump.
So Trump has been active on social media since this past weekend. Last night, he posted a video that seems to be an attack ad against Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. What can you tell us about his flurry of posts, and what kind of pressure is Bragg facing right now?
Yeah, Alvin Bragg has put out to his office in a memo that they will be undeterred by any of the outside pressure from whether it be Republican politicians or whether it be from the likes of individuals online. You can see in a statement he writing saying, "We will not be intimidated by attempts to undermine the justice process, nor will we let baseless accusations deter us from fairly applying the law." Of course, the pressure is coming from the highest place, and that is Donald Trump himself, who over the last now 3 days has put out a litany of statements on his Truth social media account, as well as a video calling into question the integrity of Alvin Bragg and putting pressure on the prosecutor's office as they considered attempting to bring charges against him.
And Vaughn, do we know how the Secret Service would handle a possible indictment here?
We know per multiple sources to NBC News that the Secret Service would intend to stay with Donald Trump every step of the process, from arraignment to even potential jail time. This is for the Secret Service, this federal agency that is in the position to protect Donald Trump. They suggest that they will be there, and over the course of the next week, if Donald Trump were to be arraigned in New York City, they would try to keep him out of public view the best they can. Of course, Donald Trump often has his own plan plans. And if he were to request the Secret Service to not be with him, then that would mean something else. But when you see the security measures already being taken around the U.S. Capitol because of potential protests, but also there in New York City, there is, of course, security concerns around the potential arraignment and indictment of Donald Trump.
All right, Von Hilliard in West Palm Beach, Florida. Von, thank you.
Now let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good morning. So Robert Costello spoke to reporters after he testified yesterday, and he was really stoking questions about Cohen's credibility. So first, let's take a listen.
Now, the problem here is that the district attorney has so far not provided all of those documents to the grand jurors. I have nothing to hide. All of those documents were provided to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They did the smart thing. They looked at Michael Cohen. They said he's a convicted perjurer, and there must be 100 instances in those documents of him lying to us. So they said, we just can't trust this guy. You can't rely upon him.
So further context here, Costello met Cohen back in 2018 when he was being investigated by prosecutors. And in response to these claims, Cohen has said, quote, so many things that he said were untrue. So how valuable was this testimony in court?
It's probably a net neutral result because at the end of the day, Michael Cohen is a witness that everybody knows has credibility problems. You don't need Robert Costello to hold a press conference or talk to reporters to learn that Michael Cohen is a convicted liar and that prosecutors would have problems if they made him their star witness. But that would lead me to believe that there's no way Michael Cohen is their star witness. He may be important to authenticate documents. That is a move that won't hurt prosecutors. Who cares if he's a liar? Here's a document. It's a business record. That's this person's signature. This is what the business record is for. That could be compelling stuff. And Robert Costello also mentioned the documents that weren't introduced to the grand jury. I feel his pain, but at the same time, prosecutors are not required to introduce all evidence or even exculpatory evidence. It's their show in the grand jury. They can choose to put on or introduce whatever they like.
Let's look ahead. Sources say that the next grand jury date is tomorrow. What would be the next possible steps for the grand jury if there is going to be an indictment?
They could return a true bill. And when it comes to procedure, you take normal procedure and throw it out the window because this is about as special a situation as it gets with Donald Trump being a potential defendant. So while you might expect that if they were to wrap up their work, they would do it Wednesday because they may not want to wait until next week. Or it's possible that they're nowhere near finished. Maybe Robert Costello opened up a whole new avenue of inquiry, but that's not likely given the fact that Michael Cohen was there as a rebuttal witness and no one saw the need to call him to rebut Costello's testimony.
Well, all eyes on this case, especially here in New York. Danny Costello, thank you so much.
Danny Costello? How dare you? And now, Robert Savalos.
Danny Savalos, thank you so much.
All right, let's get the latest now on major storms and new flooding expected to sweep California.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now for more on this. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Does it feel like deja vu? Because it does to me. Another day where we are gearing up for an atmospheric river event that's going to inundate California with a whole lot of rain. And you see the alerts that we've got up right now with this next storm system. Flood alerts totaling 17 million. We've got winter weather alerts that extend into the parts of the high plains, as well as those wind alerts that are going to be impacting parts of the Southwest over the coming days. So let's start with what's happening right now. Some of that heavy rain has already worked on shore for folks in California, and it extends basically from San Francisco all the way down to San Diego. Now, the heaviest rain is going to be focused into Southern California and stretching into parts of Central California. But it really looks like the bulk of the highest totals will be focused towards Los Angeles and parts of San Diego, extending in between those two locations. And there's the storm system, another atmospheric river event. It doesn't look quite as strong as the previous one that we dealt with, but even still, any additional rainfall, any additional snowfall could be problematic here going over the next 24 hours. We'll also have really strong winds. I mentioned those wind alerts, and for good reason. Winds up to 40, even 50 miles per hour and extending into parts of the Southwest. Now, watch what happens, though, as we go through late parts of today. We'll start to see rain kind of winding down a bit for especially Northern California and Central California. We'll see some lingering showers here as we get into tomorrow, but this storm system system starts to bring parts of the south, some strong to severe storms. It'll also bring some rain, the extension of it. It'll bring some rain to parts of the northeast, and we'll see even some snow into parts of the Midwest. So rainfall totals in California, anywhere from 7 to 10 inches are going to be the higher ends of what we'll see. And again, that's focused into Southern California. We'll see places like Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, San Diego, even near Temecula, could see some of those isolated higher amounts. We'll see more like widespread 3 to 5 inches as we get through Thursday. And this will even extend into parts of the Intermountain West, although it's really the California area that we're most concerned about. But then, as that system moves to the east, we have heavy rain that's going to work across parts of the Midwest as well, 1 to 2 inches in some spots. How about the snowfall? A couple more feet in places like the Sierra Range as well as the San Gabriel Mountains. Really don't need a whole lot more snow there, but we're going to get some. And then, again, there's the snow that we'll see working through parts of the Midwest, anywhere from 3 to 7 inches possible. The winds, 40, 50 miles per hour, they'll be problematic when it comes to the downed trees, down power lines. All of that is on the table here as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours, guys.
Important updates, Angie. Thank you. Turning now to a story garnering national attention. The death of Irvo Otieno this morning. The Washington Post publishing the surveillance video showing his final moments. Otieno is the 28-year-old black man who died in police custody at a Virginia hospital earlier this month. We do want to warn you, this video is difficult to watch. The hospital surveillance video shows Otieno being dragged into an admissions room in handcuffs and leg irons before several deputies and hospital staff start piling on top of him until he stops moving. Prosecutors intended to release this video to the public today, but defense attorneys were trying to block that from happening, saying it would taint the jury pool. According to the Washington Post, the footage was obtained by clicking on a series of Dropbox links in the prosecutor's court filing. NBC News does not know how the video has been edited or what was taken out. 7 Henrico County Sheriff's deputies and 3 hospital staff members are now facing second-degree murder charges. Attorneys for 2 of the deputies have previously said that their clients are innocent. A grand jury is expected to meet later today to review the case. And in other news today, President Biden is crossing one item off his presidential bucket list, using his veto power for the first time yesterday. The president rejected a bipartisan measure that would nullify a new administration rule for retirement plans. He posted a video on social media about his decision.
I just signed this veto because the legislation passed by the Congress would put at risk the retirement savings of individuals across the country. They couldn't take into consideration investments that wouldn't be impacted by climate, impacted by overpaying executives, and that's why I decided to veto it.
CNBC reporter Brandon Gomez joins us now to break it all down. Brandon, good morning. So this measure really centers on the issue of socially conscious investments, something Biden's opponents called woke capitalism. What exactly should we know about what was initially proposed?
That's right, Zinkley. So, I mean, putting that definition in terms, right, woke capitalism, I mean, what it really is, it's a set of standards that just socially conscious investors use to make sure their money aligns with certain values, right? So what was being proposed? It was a ban on federal managers of retirement plans from considering certain factors when making investments, factors like climate change, right? Considering if a company is overpaying executives, situations where there's an outstanding legal battle at the company, right? And so why veto? Biden said that these have material impact on the business bottom line, as you heard in that soundbite there. These are factors that should be considered by investors when they're considering where to put their money in terms of long-term return on their investments.
Brandon, many were expecting the president to battle with Republican lawmakers on different issues, government spending and the nation's debt limit. So why did President Biden use his first veto on this particular measure, and what are Republicans saying about it?
I mean, it's true, and those issues aren't off the table, right? We still may see those issues come up further down the line. I think this is an issue that you're going to hear a lot about, especially on the 2024 campaign trail if Florida Governor Ron DeSantis puts his hat in the bid, right? So he's been very vocal on this conversation about socially conscious investing. Really, the thesis of the conversation there is that business impact is not materially measured, right? So there's no real way to measure how a company performs based on these metrics. Now, here at CNBC with our partners at Just Capital, we actually turned to the data, right, and saw that companies that prioritize certain issues that we're talking about here, right, diversity in the workforce, these issues do matter, and they do actually outperform their peers.
And Brandon, what's next with the measure for those who maybe forget their political or government classes from high school? Is it dead in the water after this veto, or is there another route to getting it passed?
Yeah, so there would need to be a 2/3 majority in each chamber of the Congress to overturn as well. You could also see it on the state level, right? So in states like Florida, they can individually decide whether or not they want to ban these types of investments. I think really this is, again, going to be a conversation moving forward, but one that we need to sort of keep track of as we continue to head towards 2024 and lead with the data, right? Not just the opinion.
A lot to watch. Brandon Gomez, thank you so much.
We could soon learn a lot about what the government has learned about the origins of the COVID-19 virus. On Monday, President Biden signed a bill that directs the federal government to declassify as much intelligence as possible about the virus's origins. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander joins us now with more. Peter, good morning, my friend. So this new law would declassify some intelligence related to the virus in China. Do we know what we might learn and how soon?
Yeah, Joe, it's a good question. This new move by President Biden is going to give Americans really their first chance to see for themselves the intelligence that the country has gathered on the origins of COVID-19. The president, as you noted, signed this bipartisan bill Monday, backed by Democrats and Republicans. It orders this country's top intelligence official, the Director of National Intelligence, to declassify all information that details the potential links between China's Wuhan lab and the COVID outbreak. And it has to happen within 90 days, President Biden saying he wants to be as transparent as possible about how the pandemic may have started, but he acknowledges the need, of course, to protect against the release of anything that could harm national security. As you know, the U.S. intelligence community right now remains split about COVID's origins. You got the Department of Energy and the FBI that have both recently said it was likely a lab leak, but then other agencies have said it may have started naturally. All of this matters because if COVID came from a Chinese lab, it would further break down these already strained relations between the U.S. and China. China has repeatedly blocked global efforts to try to figure out exactly where COVID-19 began, Joe.
Yeah, and Peter, at the same time, we're watching yesterday's meeting between Chinese President Xi and Russian President Putin. As you mentioned, comes with relations between China and the U.S. incredibly strained. What's the White House saying about that encounter?
Yeah, day 2 of that visit going on as we speak. The White House has called on China's President Xi to condemn Russia for its year-long war in Ukraine. Obviously, that hasn't happened. You remember Xi's pre-planned visit comes just days after the International Criminal Court accused the Russian president of war crimes. So this is obviously a major show of support for Russia from the leader of the world's second largest superpower. The U.S. has publicly warned the world that China may still send lethal weapons to Russia and not to be fooled by these potential proposals for a ceasefire, Joe.
All right, Peter Alexander at the White House. Peter, thank you so much.
Now to the banking crisis, where investor fears appear to be easing after U.S. stock markets closed in positive territory yesterday.
The relief rally is continuing in Europe this morning, while U.S. futures are pointing to a positive market open. All this as investors digest the landmark takeover of Swiss bank Credit Suisse by UBS. Investopedia's editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver, joins us now. So, Caleb, investor nerves appear to be settling down a little bit following some rather stressful days there on the market. Are we out of the woods yet, or what are you watching for?
Got a little spring awakening for stocks, but actually this rally began last week, except in financials, which we know have been under the microscope lately. So you've seen regional bank stocks recover a lot yesterday, except for First Republic. That stock was down 45%, despite talks of JP Morgan and others trying to arrange some solution for the bank. That bank stock is rallying again this morning. So a little bit of a relief rally, but the Fed starts its meeting today. They will meet in about 1 day and 7 hours from now. We'll have a decision on interest rates, and that should be pivotal for investors.
And Caleb, I will bear some bad news because one stock continued to fall yesterday. First Republic Bank, the stock closed nearly 50% lower after a ratings agency cut its credit rating. And CNBC sources reveal that JP Morgan is actually advising this bank. What's happening there?
Yeah, well, as we know, First Republic has been one of those regional banks under the microscope. Was very healthy a couple years ago, but investors have really bailed out of that stock because they're concerned about the level of uninsured deposits at the bank. We know that bank took took a $30 billion lifeline from 11 other banks last week. Now JP Morgan reportedly, according to CNBC, advising on whether it should go up for sale or are they going to try to raise new money. All of that dilutes shareholders. The stock's rallying again this morning. And what's interesting is a lot of this concern is centered around the banking sector, but the rest of the stock market is doing all right. That might be an anticipation that the Fed will have softer, more dovish words tomorrow, even if it raises rates a quarter point. Just the language, words matter. The language that Fed Chair Powell uses tomorrow is going to be important for investor sentiment. They're looking for a reason to believe, investors, because they haven't had one for a very long time. Maybe we get that tomorrow.
Let's dissect the Fed in meeting this week, because there's a lot of folks who say, hey, listen, the reason we're having these banking issues is because the interest rates are simply too high right now. What are the options for the Fed? Do we expect a rate hike? Is it possible they say, no, we're not going to raise this time around? Could they even bring them down a little bit?
Right. They say the Federal Reserve raises interest rates until something breaks. Something broke. That was the balance sheets of a lot of these regional banks. But the Fed is still dealing with inflation on the one hand and this banking crisis on the other. It has tools for both. So by raising rates a quarter point, and there's about an 80% probability that will happen, they'll probably keep doing that to keep the inflation situation continuing to fall. But they have to deal with the banking crisis, and they're doing that by offering liquidity to banks in a way that we haven't seen since 2008.
And keep an eye for whatever Jerome Powell says after they make their decision, because you say that'll play a key role.
Words matter.
All right. Thank you so much, Caleb Silver. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.